Hello everyone. This week's parashat Terumah, begins a new chapter in the Chumash. A whole new topic is revealed to us. The Mishkan, the Hamikdash, one of the more important mitzvot in the Torah that take over huge sections of mitzvot, Seder and Shas, but at the same time, halachot that are very, very removed from us, very far from our understanding and our connection with, because we live in a world without a Mikdash. We live in a world where our Avodat Hashem has nothing to do with the Mikdash. We mention our tefillot, we talk about it, we yearn for it perhaps, but in our day-to-day lives, of course, there is nothing. There's no connection to the Mikdash as a mitzvah, as a tool, in which we worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as such, they are what we would call Hilchot de Mashiach. They are halachot to do with the Mashiach period. So some might say that we are living in times of Mashiach. Hopefully, that's what we hope and pray. So obviously, it's appropriate for us to learn about Hilchot HaMikdash, and I would like to give a shir today about the mitzvah of building the Mikdash, and different questions that have to do with the idea of the mitzvah to build a Mikdash. Today's shir will not just focus on the halakhic question, whether or not there's a mitzvah and what it includes, but also with the philosophy, the theology behind the Mikdash, and we're going to connect those philosophies to the mitzvah itself, the practicality, perhaps, of the mitzvah to build the Mikdash. So let's begin. Let's begin with what is the essence, what is the idea of the mitzvah of the Mikdash. Nechama Leibovich, in her commentary on this week's Parashat Terumah, has a whole chapter in which she compares certain phrases, words, terms that are mentioned in the context of the Mikdash, of the Mishkan, that take us back to B'riyat HaOlam, creation of the world. In front of you, you can see in the first source, I quoted a midrash, and this is just one of many sources that connect B'riyat HaOlam to B'riyat Hamikdash, Hamishkan. For example, look at the midrash in front of you. The midrash quotes the pasuk in Tehillim, "Lama hu omer Hashem ahavti me'od beitecha u'mekom mishkan kevodecha bishvil sheshakul keneged briyat ha'olam." What is the greatness of the Mishkan of Hashem? Because it's as if the creation of the world. How do you see that? Ketzad. In the creation of the world, it says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, and it says in Tehillim, it also describes the creation of the world, Notesh shamayim ka'yiriyah. Baruch Hu created the sky as a yiriyah, as a sheet, or a better word, curtain. Uva mishkan ma'kativ ve'asita yiriyot izim, also a curtain made out of goat skin. Or Bashini Rakia, in the second day it says Yehi Rakia v'Amir ben Havdalah, Shenemar v'im Avdil ben Mayim lemayim, which Baruch Hu differentiated, separated between the water above to the water below. Uva Mishkan, we also have this idea of the Hivdilah Parochet Lachem, that the curtain is supposed to differentiate, separate between sections of the Mishkan. I'm sure if you think about it, if you this week's parasha, if you go to Nechama Leibovich, you'll see a whole list of phrases. Just another one. Vayichlu hashamayim va'aretz. We all know that phrase from Kiddush. That's mentioned in the Torah in Parashat Bereshit. Vayichlu, And we have a similar phrase, Vayichal Moshe, Livnot HaMishkan. We see comparisons. And of course, in the world of halacha, we learned all the Isurim of Shabbat, Lametet Avot Melacha, 39 Melachot of Melacha Shabbat that we're not allowed to do, are learned from the Mishkan. Shabbat, Bereshit, Shabbat, of course, takes us back to creation of the world. And the fact that we cannot do Melacha and Shabbat is connected to what we did in the Mishkan, right? All the Melachot that were done in the Mishkan to build the Mishkan, Chachamim learned that there's 39 of them. Why 39? I'm not going to go into the whole discussion right now, but it's learned perhaps from the word Melacha that appears 39 times. Rabbi Ben Nun wrote a whole article arguing with that and proving that the different melachot that are mentioned in Parshat Pekudei are 39 if you count them. There's 39. It's an amazing idea of his, but anyway, it doesn't make a difference right now. The idea is that there's a deep connection between Shabbat, Bereshit, and the Mishkan. And this goes on and on and on. There's another, I'll give you one more idea. The Torah teaches us that you're not allowed to break Shabbat even to build a Mishkan. The famous halacha that the Torah teaches us this idea. Why would I think that you should why would I think even that you should break Shabbat to build a Mishkan? Without going into the discussion right now, I'm just trying to prove to you that there's a deep connection between Shabbat and the Mishkan, between Briat, Shamayim Va'aretz, creation of the world, and the Mishkan. Why? What's the idea? Why is this idea such a... Okay, beautiful, Mishkan and... Why? What is the connection? My good friend, Amnon Bazak, once wrote a beautiful piece about this, and I love it so much. And this has to do with one of the most profound ideas in Judaism. It's mentioned in so many places. The Torah teaches us that we must try to imitate the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There are so many midrashim about this. Just to quote one, it's in front of you, source number 2. Acharei Hashem Elokeichem telechu. The Torah teaches us that you should follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The midrash questions. V'chi efshar lo le'adam le'alech acher Shechina. Is it possible for a person to connect himself to the Shechina, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How is it possible? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Eish Ochla. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is fire. And fire, if you come close to fire, you burn. The Torah says, Uvot tidbakun. You are expected to somehow cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to attach yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How is that possible, says the Midrash? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is fire. You'll burn. Ela lehalach achar midotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm sure you've met this idea so many different places. It's not just an idea. Rav Soloveitchik, in one of his articles, said this is one of the most profound ideas of Judaism, to always try to imitate HaKadosh Baruch Hu's attributes. We learn from HaKadosh Baruch Hu when we say, Yugimel midot rachamim, Hashem, Hashem, Kei rachu v'chanun. What do you think it means? That if you scream that very loudly, so all your sins will be forgiven? The most simple understanding is, those are the midot of Hashem. Those are the attributes, the characteristics of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We try to imitate, to be rachum, v'chanun, erech hapayim, v'rav chesed v'emet. If we change our characteristics and imitate the ways of Hashem in this world, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu will forgive us. That's the idea of the Gimel Rachamim. And here in the Midrash even teaches us that the source for many mitzvot ben adam lechavero, many of the mitzvot that we perform of being friendly to each other, of bikur cholim, of visiting the sick, of nichum avelim, of even kvura, are learned from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu visited the sick. He visited Avram. HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to the mourners. When came to visit the mourners? To Yitzchak. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu buried the dead. Who did he bury? Moshe. He buried Moshe. This could be, by the way, the source of these mitzvot, according to some people. It's a fascinating idea. What is the source? To imitate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, why am I bringing this midrash in this context? The answer is very simple. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us to build a Mishkan, and He's reminding us You know why you build the Mishkan? Because I created the world. When I created the world, I did a chesed to you. What did I do for you? I built you a home. So you must imitate my characteristics, my attributes, and you now must build me a home. The idea of building a home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu here amongst us is doing the exact same that He has done for us. He built us a home, so must we build Him a home. That is the connection between the Mishkan and Briat Shemayim V'Aretz. I think, as I said, this idea is a very deep idea. It goes on to so many different places. It connects Shabbat, Briat HaOlam, to the Mishkan, because the yesod, the idea, the principle of what makes the ethical idea of entertaining as a Kodesh Baruch Hu, of having Him a guest in our home, of making Him feel comfortable amongst us, building Him a home, is based upon Hakarat HaTov, that He also built a world for us to dwell in. However, there's an alternative, completely different idea within our sources for the idea of the Mishkan. And I actually think it's almost a machloket, not just another idea, and I'll explain soon why I think it's a machloket. And this is a very well-known Ramban in this week's parsha. It's a long Ramban. The Ramban, it's in source number 3. I just brought you a little snippet of this Ramban, but I'm sure the Shabbat will all be happy to sit down and learn the Ramban inside. It's a long Ramban. Says the Ramban, Sod HaMishkanu Shiyeh HaKavod Asher Shachan Al Har Sinai Shochen Alav V'Nistar. The tzivui of the Mishkan, Parshat Truma, is taught right after Matan Torah. Now, I'm sure we all know there's a very famous machloket, which I'm not going to go into too much, just mention it. The world famous machloket. What is the correct order of events in Chumash Sefer Shmot? The order that we have in front of us, that we read, is first we have Matan Torah, then we have the commandment to build the Mishkan, and finally Chet HaEgel. Well, I'm sure people are familiar that according to Rashi, the order is messed up, and the real order is first Matan Torah, then Chet HaEgel, and then the Mishkan, which, by the way, changes everything, which, again, I don't have the time to go into right now, but it would change probably the whole understanding of the Mishkan, but if we have time, we'll go back to that. According to the Ramban says that the order is correct, and this is the right order. According to the Ramban, why is it so important that the tzivui of the Mishkan is immediately after Matan Torah? Why is it so important? According to Rashi, no, it was much later. No, according to the Ramban, we were given the Torah, and then we were told to build the Mishkan. Why? Because if you think about it, what is the Mishkan? The Mishkan is a replica of Matan Torah, of Har Sinai. Because Matan Torah, says the Ramban, is such an important event that created a certain understanding in people's minds that Kadosh Baruch Hu reveals Himself to us. He comes down, He speaks to us, He gave us the Torah. Anyone witnessing Matan Torah, witnessing, hearing, experiencing the giving of the Torah, will have no doubts that Kadosh Baruch Hu appears to us, reveals Himself to us, gives us the Torah. The Torah comes from the heaven. It's an amazing, amazing event. And really, it would be best if every year or so we would have that experience. Every 20 years, every 30 years, every 100 years. It would be wonderful. However, that's not the world we live in. So we have to somehow take that event and establish it in something fixed to remind us of that event. That it should be fixed in our minds throughout our entire lives. And what is that? That's the Mishkan. If you think about it, it says the Ramban, Har Sinai, just imagine, is a mountain in which Moshe is going up to the mountain in a cloud. There's a cloud, right? And in this cloud, Kadosh Baruch Hu appears and from that cloud, as if what comes down, the Torah. Now let's think about what the Mishkan is. The Mishkan is there's a lot of things going on there, but the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of the Holy, what do we have? The Ark. And what's in the Ark? The Torah. And when does Hashem speak to Moshe? Rashi speaks Parsha, tries to explain it. It's a bit of a balagan, the Pesukim, but Rashi explains that when the Anan comes down, Ki be'anan era'eh el hakaporet, when Baruch Hu comes down in the cloud above the kaporet and speaks to Moshe through the Kodesh HaKodashim, where the Torah is. That's where the Aron is, the Chot HaBrit. So it's a mini Matan Torah. Every time God talks to Moshe, he basically is he's reliving Matan Torah. So the Mishkan really is, the Mishkan is a reminder of HaKadosh Baruch Hu appearing to us, giving us the Torah, and that's why the most important place in the Mishkan is the Aron and the Torah. This has, by the way, interesting halachic ramifications, because the Kedusha of the Mishkan, the Kedusha of the Hamikdash, the Kedusha of a shul is always based upon what? Torah. It's only about Torah. It's the Torah that makes the Mishkan, the Mikdash, the shul, kadosh. The halachic concept of Kedusha, that is called a Mikdash, is based upon the Torah. A Mikdash without Torah is not kadosh. There's no Kedusha. A shul without a Knesset, without a Sefer Torah, is not kadosh. There's no Kedusha. Yes, someone had their hand up. Please. Someone had
I was just wondering, what you're saying is absolutely correct, but isn't it also so that the Mishkan is the place not just where the Torah resides, but where Hashem resides?
Okay.
So that when you look at it, you're not just seeing the Torah, but you're seeing Hashem.
I agree. I mean, you're experiencing Hashem coming down.
That's why they call it the Mishkan.
Right. I agree with you. But I'm saying it's all around Torah. That's what I wanted to say. It's about that idea. How does... we're going to a whole philosophical discussion, which I don't want to go too much right now, but I'll just say it really quickly. How does Baruch Hu reveal himself to us? It's a big question. All philosophers ask this question. All Chassidut, philosophy, Kabbalah asks this question. In what way do we experience God in this world? So Chassidut will say, through Torah. Through the Torah, Kabbalah, through the Torah, we experience HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we learn Torah, we're connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself here in this world by Torah. I can go back and forth right now. I'll just give you, I'll throw to you something, right? You know, I said before that creation of the world goes back to the Mishkan. The Mishkan goes to Torah. I'll just give you, I'll throw you an example. B'asara ma'avarot nivra olam. How did Baruch Hu create the world? By speech. By speech. What happened in Matan Torah? Baruch Hu spoke to us. The two times that Baruch Hu speaks to us is creation and Matan Torah. And how many, what's the number? 10. Ba'asara ma'amarot nivra olam. And the 10 Commandments. You see the parallel? How does Baruch Hu reveal himself? Briat ha'olam is through speech, he creates the world. And through Torah, he creates a new world. And and here I'll go to my question. That again, it's not my main shiur. I'll just mention this as an introduction. You feel the tension between these two events. You have creation of the world versus Yetziat Mitzrayim, Matan Torah. You see these two events, these two historical events. What is the difference between them? I'll give you a second to ask or to comment. There is a tension in Judaism in every aspect between these two events. Briat HaOlam or Yetziat Mitzrayim / Matan Torah. These are two very different events. And I want to argue that the tension between these two events follows us in every aspect in our Avodat Hashem. Shabbat. At Friday night, what do we focus on Friday night? On Bereshit bara Elokim v'chol shamayim v'aretz. Shabbat because of Bereshit. Shabbat morning, what do we focus on? Yetziat Mitzrayim. You see both events, right? Yom Tov. Why do we keep Yom Tov? The Torah tells us to keep Yom Tov. Why? It's Chag HaKatzir, Chag HaAsif, Chodesh HaAviv. These are all natural reasons to keep Chagim. Creation of the world of Teva, the world of nature. And yet, why do we keep the Chagim? Yetziat Mitzrayim, Yetziat Mitzrayim. See the tension? In almost everything that we do. And the Mishkan is not any different. What is the focus of the Mishkan? We just saw two different ideas. Is it going back to creation of the world, or is it going back to Matan Torah? Two very different ideas. Rabbi Levi, the Kuzari, argues about this. This is what he Mamash argues. When I say argue, why do I know he argues? Because in Sefer Kuzari, when he introduces Judaism to us, he says to us, what is the most important idea for Jews? The most important event in history. He says is what? Yetziat Mitzrayim, Matan Torah. And the king of Khuzar gets very angry. Why? The king of Khuzar gets very angry. Why? Because king of Khuzar is a goy. And he's looking for Judaism. And what are you telling him? You can't be part of this. Because Matan Torah, Yetziat Mitzrayim, only talks to the Jews. While creation of the world is universal for everyone. And he gets very angry. That's, by the way, why? That's why Chazal tell us that Lama Dikra Sinai, Shimisham Sinai Yarda La'olam. Chazal tell us, you know when anti-Semitism begins? At Har Sinai, when the Baruch Hu separates us. So there's a big tension between universalism, which is B'riyat Shemayim V'aretz, and to being chosen. Now, why do I know that this is a machloket? Because the Ibn Ezra in Parashat Yitro, in his commentary, says, my good friend Yudah Halevi and I have an argument about this question. He says it black and white. When God reveals himself and says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Hotziticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, the Kuzari says, Rabbi Levi says, because that's the best way for God to reveal himself to the people. God as the Redeemer of Egypt. However, I, Ibn Ezra, think that that's a mistake. It would have been better for God to declare himself, I am God, Asher Barati Shemayim V'aretz. That's a greater idea. However, he says, most people are stupid. Most people are stupid and they can't understand God as creator. But everyone can understand God, understanding in Har Sinai, and he's talking to them. Kuzari says, no. The better historical event in which we feel and know God is when we see him, when we hear him, which happened in Yetziat Mitzrayim, which happened in Matan Torah. So there's a tension in Jewish philosophy between which is the more important event. We see this in Shabbat, in Yom Tov, and also in the Mishkan. I want to claim, this is my claim, you could argue with me, and this is also an argument between the Haredi world and the modern Orthodox world. Not the Zionist world, the modern Orthodox world. I think that the Haredi world, it's a different angle I'm saying right now, begins Jewish history from Matan Torah. I think the modern Orthodox world, like our Soloveitchik, begins history of the world of Am Yisrael at B'riyat Shemayim V'aretz.
Breshit, the whole thing starts with Breshit.
I'm saying, Rav Hutner, there's a famous Rav Hutner. Rav Lichtenstein said that he argued with Rav Hutner about this. Rav Hutner, he says his Rebbe told him that once Matan Torah was given, everything before that is not important. And Rav Lichtenstein said, I disagree. I disagree with my Rebbe. I think that B'riyat Shemayim V'aretz is also our identity. Where does Judaism begin? Does Judaism begin at the creation of the world, or Judaism begins at Matan Torah? It's a machlokah. I think it's a. So what I'm saying right now is a huge discussion, which I'm stopping right now. But what I wanted to say, and with that we'll continue. We'll just sum this up and continue. That there seems to be a machloket machshavtit, a philosophical, theological, perhaps, argument or different attitudes of what is the idea behind the Mishkan. Does it take us back to creation of the world, or does it take us back to Yetziat Mitzrayim / Matan Torah? two very important historical events that maybe come together in the building of the Mishkan. Yes, Phil.
Very simple question. How do you define Torah?
Torah?
Yeah.
Really?
Honestly. It's a very simple question.
Torah is the Baruch Hu, Chamisha Chumshei Torah.
Oh,
And everything else, Torah Sheba'al Peh.
but everything is Torah?
There's Rashi Bichtav, there's Rashi Ba'al Peh.
Wait a second. Let's go. What did Hashem give us?
Give us a USB. A USB of Bar Ilan, I assume. The US, the Bar Ilan project with all the shooting?
Didn't he give us just Esther Hatibrat?
Okay, we really don't want to go there right now, please.
But
That's a big
the essence
discussion,
of the
right.
argument.
We believe, whatever it means right now, this is really not my topic right now, if that's okay, but part of our belief is that the Torah was given to us at Sinai. Now what does that mean? Was it given to us in a disk, on a flop disk, on a USB, or the idea of Torah in potential being given to Am Yisrael, and that's really books. Books have been written about this question, right? I really don't want to go there if that's okay right now.
So how do you vote?
How do I vote?
Yeah. For what is included in Torah? Because basically,
He just told
Phil, please. I still want to have a job after I teach this year today. Be very careful. We're going to minefield right now. Please.
let's go to the cloud.
Yes.
You mentioned the way to know God and relate to God is through Torah.
Yeah.
But what about all that He created? What we feel when we see nature, when we see what the brachot we have to make when we see wondrous events.
Right. So again, this is
That is a connection.
right. So that's more. You're right. So that's more the Rambam. Right. I'm saying there's a big machloket about this. The Rambam would agree with you much more. The Rambam says, how do you figure out who God is? How do you relate to God? Through creation, right? Rabbi Levi will say through history. Some people say through Torah. It's a huge topic. I really don't want to go to it right now, if that's okay. Let's focus on the Mishnah now. Let's go back to the Mishnah. Yes.
Good idea. I should not relate it to what you were saying. The Anan represents the Kodesh Baruch Hu's Shekhinah is in this world.
Yeah.
But how do you understand it when it moves away?
That Kodesh Baruch Hu exists, but he decides sometimes to reveal himself more, sometimes less. Just like we do. There's time of Hester, and there's time of Gilui. I think that's like Matan Torah. Let's learn out. That was introduction. That was just a few ideas. Now let's go into the halachic discussion.
This is what happens when you got the whole morning.
When I got?
Yeah, you came twice now.
What do you mean?
No.
No, he's only once
It's only
now.
one hour. You go more than
Yeah. Okay. I'm supposed to come here 2 weeks from now, so we'll see what before we finish by now. Look at the Rambam, please, on the bottom. What is the source? It is a mitzvah to build a Hamikdash. Where do we know there's a mitzvah to build a Mishkan or Hamikdash? So the Rambam, quotes this week's parsha. Mitzvat aseh la'asot Beit la'Hashem. Muchan, ready, prepared. Liot makrivim bo korbanot. According to the Rambam, what is the essence of the Beit Hamikdash? What is its main purpose? A place for sacrifice. Interesting. Because that would mean that perhaps what is the more important vessel in the Mishkan or the Mikdash? Mizbeach, and not perhaps the Aron. We, according to the Ramban, I know it's Machshava what we said until now, but according to the Ramban, we might have thought that the more important vessel would have been the Torah, the Aron. And the Rambam right away tells us that the Mizbeach should be the more important vessel. Chogigim Elav, this is the place where we go 3 times a year. Shene'emar ve'asuli mikdash. This week's parsha. Ve'asuli mikdash. The Rambam holds this is the source that teaches us that you have to build a mikdash. Put this on the side a second. Just to say a few words about the importance of the Mizbeach as Mekom HaMikdash. Historically, the Rambam is 100% correct. And why is that? We have a tradition. The Rambam writes this tradition in halacha. It sounds like a beautiful idea, and yet it's brought down in Hilchot Beit HaBechira. We have a tradition that the Mekom HaMikdash is based upon what? Historically, what happened in that place? The Akedah took place there, and before the Akedah took place there, Adam HaRishon. This was Makom, and the Akedah took place there afterwards. First, we have Adam HaRishon, Cain, have the whole story Cain there of sacrificing. We have Yitzchak bin Akedah, which basically means that that what makes Beit, the Mikdash, a place of God, is a place of sacrifice. That's where the Akedah took place. That's where the Korbanot before the Akedah took place. And that, of course, is where David HaMelech, in Sefer Shmuel and Sefer Divrei Yamim, more explicitly, it teaches us that David HaMelech, how did he know that that would be Makom HaMikdash? He was told by God to sacrifice his sacrifice to stop the plague. Remember, in Sefer Shmuel, there was a terrible plague. People were dying of Dever, of the plague, and remember the famous Malach stands with a sword above the Mizbech, right? When we say Vayomer Hashem Gad, right? In Tachanun, that's the pasuk from there, and it says, Hashem says to David, if you build a Mizbeach on that mountaintop, then the plague will end. In other words, the essence of the Mikdash is build a Mizbeach, sacrifice, and the plague will go away. And that takes us back to the Akedah, takes us Yaakov. The idea of the Mizbeach is essential for the Makom HaMikdash. That seems to be the essence of the Mikdash. According to the Rambam, it makes sense.
Isn't it halachically correct that you can have the Mizbeach, if you know where to put it, and do korbanot even before you build the Beit?
Hopefully we'll get there. Yes.
Doesn't the Mizbeach also represent talking to God in a relationship? In other words, when we bring a korban, we're not just bringing a korban. What are you doing? We're saying something to God.
What do we say to God?
Well, for example, if you had a chay,
Vidui.
and you bring korban, what do you say?
We say Vidui.
So it's a way of building a relationship with Hashem.
Maybe.
Whereas
Okay.
the Torah is the Torah out there.
Okay.
And this is
Maybe. What I want to focus on is a question, a world famous question on this Rambam. Everyone asks this question. The Rambam points out that the source that teaches us that it's mitzvah to build a Mishkan or a Mikdash is Vasuli Mikdash. However, if you look at the next source, look out today, by the way, it's really working well with my sources. Shalosh mitzvot nitztavu Yisrael b'shat kisatam la'aretz. This is the Rambam, the last book in the Rambam. Hilchot Melachim. In the laws of kings and their wars, the Rambam teaches us, based upon the Midrash, there are 3 mitzvot that we were commanded to perform when we enter the land in the days of Yehoshua. And what were they? To appoint a king, to destroy Amalek, as it says, Timche et Zeicher Amalek, ulivnot bet HaBechira. Don't look at the sheet, look at me. Ulivnot bet HaBechira. And what should it say? Shne'emar Vasuli Mikdash. What does he write? Now you can cover. Now you can look inside. Shne'emar l'shichno tidreshu uvat Hashem. This pasuk from Rabbi, Rabbi Mitzvah Parsha. L'shichno tidreshu uvat Hashem. World famous question: why does the Rambam quote another source, another pasuk, when he explicitly taught us before that the source to build a Mishkan or a Mikdash is Vasuli Mikdash from this week's Parsha, and yet he chooses a pasuk that Baruch Hu says, L'shichno tidreshu uvat Hashem, you should come to the place of Shekhinah, where you come to the land of Israel. If you know Parshat Re'eh, Parshat Shoftim, the phrase that appears 1,000,000 times in those parashot is Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem. Very famously, Yerushalayim is not mentioned. How many times is Yerushalayim mentioned in Chumash? 0. Yerushalayim is never mentioned in Chumash. In fact, no one knows that Yerushalayim is a chosen place until the days of David HaMelech. It is a secret. No one knows. Why, says the Rambam?
Tribes will fight.
The Rambam says because 3 reasons, he says. I never understood the third. The 2 I understand. He says because if the Jews in the Midbar would know that Yerushalayim is where the Beit HaMikdash will be built, all the tribes would fight to death in the Midbar, which I guess the Rabbi knew something about Am Yisrael. And the other reason he gives, which I think is also as profound probably and proven to be right, is that the Goyim would have known before we enter the land of Israel that Yerushalayim has become a Hamikdash. By the time we enter, there would be a big golden mosque on the top of the mountain. And they would have said, that's ours, you can't build it here. So therefore, it was just a forgotten mountain, no one knew about it, and when the time was ready, they came in, it was barren, and they built a Hamikdash there. Very practical reasons, by the way, which have a lot of meaning today.
What's the third one?
Third one, I never really understood. It's the Moreh Nevuchim, I forgot right now. The reason I forgot it, I think that I never really connected to it. These two reasons I liked.
It could be the Moreh.
I don't know, look it up. It's the Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam Moreh Nevuchim. Good question. Why do I need two psukim to teach me a source for building the Mishnah?
One is location.
I'm sorry?
One is location, and the other is to do.
Okay, so before we go into that type of answer, I'm going to skip the Sefer HaMitzvot. I would like you to please look at Melech HaMishnah. Melech HaMishnah, one of the famous. By the way, to what time does the shir go to?
10:15.
10:15. Okay. No, I have to go teach. I have to go teach. So I have the shir to give soon. Okay. Melech HaMishnah is a famous commentary in the Rambam. The Melech HaMishnah says like this: "Shenemar l'shichno tidreshu v'chulei." Kasher. בברכות בית הבחירה, פרק א', כתב רבינו, מצוות עשה לעשות בית להשם, שנאמר, ועשו לי מקדש, וכאן הביא קרא אחרינה. He brought a different pasuk, שינו דרשו. That's his question, that's our question. What's his answer? ויש לומר, דהנו קראי, חד עתה למקדש, שבמדבר, וחד עתה למשכן שילה. Two psukim for two mishkans. One is the Mishkan in the desert, and one is for the Mishkan in Shiloh, or in other words, the Mishkan in Eretz Yisrael. There are two different mitzvot here. One is to build a Mishkan while Bnei Yisrael are in the desert, and one is for Eretz Yisrael. Now, to tell the truth, I don't understand the definition too well. But he does bring us forward, and I'll give him credit. He's like the first one who actually asked the question, and he's like the first one that I know of that really talked about two different ideas. However, I prefer what was said now, which I found so much written about this, and I found Rav Goren has a whole piece about this. Rabbi Soloveitchik has a Yortek shir about this. They basically say a very simple but profound idea. There are two different halachas of building a Mikdash, and the reason why the Rambam brings two different psukim, but more important, two different places, is because the focus is different. While in the Chotbet HaBechira, the Rambam is focusing on the idea of having a Mikdash, a Mishkan, a place for God to dwell in. In Ilchot Beit HaBechira, in Ilchot Melachim, the Rambam is focusing on, it's not just a house for God, it's the chosen place in Yerushalayim, in Beit, in Kol Hamikdash. And there's a major difference. What's the major difference? The Mishkan, even the Mishkan in Nov and Shiloh, that moved around in Gilgal, the Mishkan moved around. This week's Parsha, we're going to learn this week's Parsha, how it was like a Lego. It was like IKEA. You know, you build it, take it apart, put it into pieces. It's temporary. The whole idea of the Mishkan, that it goes with us wherever we go. However, we know that once the Mikdash was built, there's no going back. There's no moving. There's no elsewhere that we're going to move the Mikdash to. Nachala, it's considered the Makom Nachala. Baruch Hu moved around as if in the desert. He moved around in Israel even. But once he came to the Mikdash in Beit, in Yerushalayim, that's it. That's Makom Kavua. So the Rambam, and if you look at Rav Soloveitchik here, it says it very clearly, Achen nired pashut, B'shtei mitzvot ne'emur b'zeh. Binyan hamikdash migzerat hakatuv v'asu lemikdash. Dezeh no shayach la'aretz u'limchiat Amalek. There's a halacha that has nothing to do with the order of things. It's nothing to do with Amalek, or there's an idea, an abstract idea to build a home for God. V'gam ika din b'fnei atzma. There's another halacha of not just building a Mikdash, but building the Mikdash. Dehainu binyan Hamikdash b'Yerushalayim b'Har HaMoriah, because both are different. Chalut Hamikdash u'Beit HaBechira shnei dvarim nifradim hem. De'mekom Hamikdash chutz liYerushalayim could change. Yichol al pi hadibur lishtanot. Gilgal, Shiloh, Nov, Giv'on. It's Giv'on, by the way. It's a mistake. Sorry. It's not Gid'on, it's Giv'on. I apologize. Ma she'en ken din Beit HaBechira shebehar HaMoriah hu lidorei dorot. It's for generations onwards. As we know, the Shechina does not move from Beit. Even today, the Kedusha remains. Have you ever been to Shiloh? You've been to Shiloh, right? You know that famous area where they can measure where the Mishkan stood? You know that big, like it's a big, I'm sure you've been there, right? So can you walk there? Yeah. Can you walk, by the way, up to Har Sinai?
Yeah.
If you find
Has anyone gone to Har Sinai yet?
Where it is.
It's very strange, by the way. Very strange. It's very strange why there's no like kiosk there, up there, or yeshiva, or kollel. I mean, can you imagine? Kollel Har Sinai? I mean, there's in Brooklyn kollels, there's in China kollels, but not at Har Sinai? I mean, really? It's such a great gimmick. Come learn where it all was started from. I mean, come on, right? Anyway, it's a good question why there's nothing going on at Har Sinai today. But you're allowed to walk there. You're allowed to go up the mountain. There's only one mountain that you're not allowed to go up to, according to everyone. Everyone agrees. Even those who say go up to Har Beit agree that you can't walk in Mekom HaMikdash, of course. Today, people that go up to Har Beit go to certain areas, but not Mekom HaMikdash, Chas v'Shalom, that no one allows. There's still Kedusha today. Why? Because Baruch Hu came down and in the Mikdash, and we cannot annul that Kedusha. It's not man-made. It says Baruch Hu's Kedusha. The Rambam says explicitly. And it's based upon a pasuk. Vashimoti et Migdashchem. It says Vayikra, it says, I will desolate your Mikdash. And Chazal say, even though it's desolate, it's still Kadosh. How are we learn after the pasuk? Because it could have said, et Migdashchem Hashemer. But because it says Vashimoti, first the verb, I will make it desolate, it's still called Mikdash after it's desolate.
What a reason.
There's still a Kedusha. It's a Gra. The Kedusha still exists after the verb of Hashimoti. There's still Kedusha in Yerushalayim. Still Kedusha in the Mikdash. So this is saying that there's a big difference. I would like to just throw in something right now to bring everything together, but this is more a machshava idea. I would like to suggest that there's another difference between the Mishkan and Yerushalayim and the Mikdash. While the Mishkan, as the Ramban says, takes us back to Matan Torah. The Mishkan was the house of God for who? For the Jewish people. However, the Mikdash is not just the Jewish people. The Mikdash is the house of God for the entire world. When we kibiti bet tefillah yikareh l'chol ha'amim, and this goes back to the beginning of this year. What did I say at the beginning of this year? I said there's a tension between the Mishkan representing creation of the world, or representing Yetziat Mitzrayim. What's the main difference? Whether or not Baruch Hu's message is universal or just for the Jewish people. When we were in the desert, when we left Egypt, the focus was on our relationship with Baruch Hu. But when we come to Eretz Yisrael, the idea of building a Mikdash is that we hope that one day this Mikdash will also go take us back to creation of the world. It'll be a home for God, for the entire world, and not just for the Jewish people. And that really is the model, I think, of the tension that goes between the two ideas behind the Mishkan versus the Mikdash. So I want to add my idea here to Rabbi Soloveitchik. He's not saying this. I'm just putting it a little bit together. I will say to you that I found this same idea, by the way, of Rabbi Soloveitchik, written by Rav Reuven Margaliot, a genius Talmid Chacham, who wrote a very famous book on Masechet Sanhedrin, and he also says the same idea.
After Sukkot, this talks about the whole world coming.
Yeah, nachon. Oh, well, that's tension to Pesach and Sukkot. Exactly that. Pesach is a chag that focuses on Yetziat Mitzrayim, because we left Mitzrayim. Sukkot symbolizes an element of universalism, right? The haftorahs of Sukkot are all to do with universalism, and that's why Chanukhat Hamikdash was done on Sukkot, and Chanukhat HaMishkan was done when? In Chodesh Nisan.
So the 70 korban.
Obviously, that's part of it, right? I'm saying Chanukhat HaMishkan was done in Nisan. Chanukhat HaMikdash was done in Sukkot. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to say that. Because Mikdash is universalism, it's associated with Chag Sukkot. Mishkan is associated with Chodesh Nisan with Yetziat Mitzrayim. Fair? Yes?
Just, I don't know if there's an answer, but why did it take so long to build the Mikdash? Did we have to wait for David HaMelech? Like, in other words, once the land was settled, shouldn't that have been one of the first?
So the Rambam just wrote that there's an order, right? First, you have to appoint a king. That's the order the Rambam just said, right? First, you have to appoint a king, and when they appoint a king, only the days of Shmuel.
I thought a king was a little controversial.
It is, it was, and it will be. Yeah, you're right, but that's, I don't want to talk about that right now, right? That's a whole topic, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. But, and then, we destroy Amalek. And only that happened in later days of David Amalek was still fighting Amalek, right? By the way, just remember, Amalek, when we meet Amalek, when people talk about Amalek today, and I'm not going to politics right now, when we talk about Amalek and Aza, it's not just that, Amalek. Amalek in Tanakh is about kidnapping Jews.
Yes.
That's what happens, right? Twice. That when we meet Amalek, it's because they kidnapped Jews. They took the Nechshalim Acharecha in the days of in Chumash and David HaMelech. They kidnap and take his women away. That's Amalek for you. So it's not just that we're screaming, "Oh, Amalek." There's a lot of parallels here between the idea of an enemy that takes the women and children. So it's not just anyway. Amalek, and only then we build the Beit Hamikdash. And that's why David HaMelech, when he killed Amalek, he says to God, it's time to build the Mikdash, and God says, sorry, David, it's not for you because you have too much blood on your hands, it'll be your son Shlomo. So the order can make sense. Okay, so this idea of Rabbi Soloveitchik, which I just added a little bit to, Rav Gorin says a very similar idea in one of his articles. Rav Margaliot says the same idea in another place. So that really could make sense why we have two different mitzvot, two different psukim to describe the mitzvah to build a mishkan or build a mikdash. There's so much to do and we haven't finished. Okay, we're just beginning. We're just warming up here. There's another well-known famous machloket to be shown in between the Rambam and the Ramban regarding the mitzvah to build a mikdash. According to the Rambam, there is no separate mitzvah to build the Klei HaMishkan. The Torah says build a mizbeach, build an aron, build a shulchan. You might think that this should be counted as a separate mitzvah in the 613 mitzvah. And yet the Rambam argues that they're all included in the mitzvah to build a mishkan, to build a mikdash.
The Rambam?
The Rambam.
Rambam, okay.
The Ramban, right? I know, you ever saw that skit, by the way, about the Ramban? It's a very funny skit. They made it, you should Google it, it's very funny. This guy, as if the Ramban, people think he's the Rambam, because he says, I'm the Ramban. So why do you say you're Rambam? I say, I'm the Ramban. No. So why do you say that you're Rambam? We heard the Ramban, you say you're the Ramban. It's very funny. It's a very funny skit about the Ramban getting upset. People think he's the Rambam while he says, I'm the Ramban. Anyway, so the Ramban disagrees. The Ramban says that there's a mitzvah, separate mitzvah, to build an aron. it's not so clear, but there is probably a Ramban that says that there's a mitzvah to build the Aron that should be counted separately as a mitzvah, not part of the mitzvah of building the Mishkan, as well as the Ramban explains that all the mitzvot of working on Lechem Apanim, working on the Mizbeach, he says you don't need to count building their vessels separately because they are included in the mitzvah of what we should do, of what we're supposed to do on those vessels. In other words, the Ramban says theoretically you should count them separately, but we can't. We don't have to because they're just a hechsher mitzvah. They're not really the mitzvah itself. But it's clear that the Ramban disagrees with the Rambam whether or not we can separate between the vessels of the Mishkan to the Mishkan itself. I can't tell you how much has been written about this machloket to try to explain the different understandings of the Mikdash and the Mishkan according to the Rambam versus the Ramban of what the Mishkan is based upon this machloket. But one thing is for sure clear, that the Ramban understands that there is a separate mitzvah to build a Mikdash regardless to its vessels. In other words, according to the Ramban, building an empty Mikdash is fine. Not fine, but it's still a mitzvah. While according to the Rambam, it might seem that if you build a Mikdash without the vessels, you need to do the mitzvah. It's one mitzvah. You have to build a house with its furniture. There's no idea of only having a house. Now this could make sense going back to what we said before. According to the Rambam, what's the essence of the Mikdash? The korbanot, the avodah. So according to the Rambam, if you don't have a mizbeach, if you don't have all the vessels of the avodah, so it's just an empty house. That's very nice, but the essence is avodat Hashem. But according to the Ramban, we learned before, what does the Ramban say that the essence of the Mikdash is? The Shekhinah. The Shekhinah that's laid down on Har Sinai is now laying down on the Mikdash. Besides that, there's another idea, we'll say the Ramban. You have to worship, you have to do the avodah. But according to the Ramban, the mitzvah of having a house of God has its own idea, regardless to the avodah. So that fits very nicely with the machloket. Rabbi Breuer, the famous Rabbi Breuer, has a whole long article. It's very hard to understand, by the way. I find it very hard. I read it this week, 3, 4, 5 pages. Very hard, but Begadol, that's what he says. I mean, it's much longer than that. But he also points out this idea that really the main machloket is, can I separate that the Mikdash has an ideal of the Shekhinah regardless to the avodah, might go back to machloket Rambam that we spoke about in the beginning of Shir, of what is the purpose of the Mikdash. Yes?
Wasn't the idea for having sacrifices at that time because it was very common to other peoples in the area?
Yeah, that's what the Rambam says.
And I would totally agree with him
Yeah.
that today it is definitely not necessary. And as a matter of fact, it's cruelty to animals.
Okay, so that's a very famous discussion, which I'm not going to right now. You guys really always try to pull me.
That's because we have confidence that you have
Yes,
intelligence.
thank you. I guess once we discover these new hamburgers without meat in them, so maybe we'll have korbanot without meat in them either. We'll be sacrificing vegan schnitzels on the mizbeach. Maybe that's what we're waiting for. You know, that's what we're waiting for. But I'll be honest. I had much more prepared for today, but it's okay.
You're going to be here again.
B'ezrat Hashem, in 2 weeks I'm coming back. So can I suggest that in 2 weeks from now, when I come back, B'ezrat Hashem, I will continue this because I want to talk about at least 2 more questions that will come up. One is there's a very famous discussion about whether or not women are chayav to build a Beis Hamikdash. Okay. And B, is there a mitzvah today, nowadays, to build a mikdash? And if not, if yes, why don't you do it right now? And lastly, hopefully, we'll also talk about connected to that. If there is a mitzvah to build a mikdash right now, is there anything that we can do or that we should do to build the mikdash? And this will be also an historical. This will go back in history to the different attempts in Jewish history to do so. There were attempts in Jewish history already in the times of the Rishonim, to try to talk about rebuilding the Mikdash. And we'll talk
So you're
about
saying you could rebuild the Mikdash without the...
perhaps.
the
I'm
machine?
saying that's a good question. Bring your tools for next year, and your hats, you know, your hard hats. No, but seriously, those are the topics that I thought we would start about today, but not enough time. Please God, we will continue them in 2 weeks from now. So can I suggest that we collect the sheets, or take them, bring them back, or we should just collect them and have them for next time? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Thank you.